In 399 BCE, the most famous philosopher in the world was put on trial. He was 70 years old, arguably the wisest man in Athens, and he had spent his entire life trying to make his city smarter, more honest, and more just. The jury found him guilty, then they sentenced him to death, and he chose to drink the poison himself. What happened, and why does the story of Socrates still feel uncomfortably familiar more than 2000 years later? Athens, in the 5th century BCE, was the greatest democracy in the ancient world. It was also a place that had recently lost a catastrophic war, suffered a brutal dictatorship, and was trying to rebuild trust and normalcy. Into this fragile recovery walked Socrates, and he made everyone deeply uncomfortable. Socrates had a very simple method. Every day he would go to the marketplace and start conversations with people. He would ask them to make a statement they believed was true. Then he would slowly expose the logical flaws in it. Not with aggression, but with patient questions. Round after round, until the person was forced to admit they did not actually know what they thought they knew. He did this to everyone: politicians, military leaders, famous citizens. He called himself a gadfly, a fly that bites a sleeping horse to keep it awake. But here is how Athenians actually saw him: as a bully, a clown, or a fraud. A comedian named Aristophanes wrote a play called The Clouds, in which Socrates hangs from a basket on the ceiling of a school called the Thinkery, claiming the clouds are the real gods. The play ends with the school being burned down. That tells you everything about how the average Athenian felt about him. He did have devoted followers, mostly young men from wealthy and aristocratic families, who resented democracy and loved watching Socrates intellectually humiliate ordinary citizens. One of his most famous students was a man named Alcibiades, who would eventually lead Athens into a disastrous military expedition. Another was Plato. Then in 404 BCE, Athens lost the Peloponnesian War to Sparta. Sparta imposed a government called the 30 Tyrants, 30 of the wealthiest men given total control. Many of them had studied with Socrates. They murdered at least 5% of the Athenian population and stole enormous amounts of wealth from the citizens. Socrates himself refused to participate in the tyranny, but he also did not oppose it publicly. When democracy was restored, Socrates was charged with 2 crimes: impiety, disrespecting the gods of Athens, and corrupting the youth. The Athenians expected him to apologize, make some jokes, pay a fine, and walk away. Instead, he insulted the jury. He told them he was not a good speaker, but they were all rational people, and if they were thinking clearly, they would realize he was innocent. He implied that if they found him guilty, that just proved they were stupid. Then, when asked to propose his own punishment, he suggested that since he had spent his life serving Athens, a just reward would be a state pension. The jury was furious. They voted for death. Afterward, many Athenians seemed to realize they had been manipulated. Socrates was 70, with little to live for. He had just been handed the perfect martyrdom. Proof, in death, of everything he had argued in life, that democracy, because most people cannot reason carefully, will always end up killing its most honest voices. He insisted on drinking the hemlock himself. His student Plato spent the rest of his life trying to redeem Socrates in the eyes of history. At 40 years old, he founded a school called the Academy. At around 375 BCE, he wrote his greatest work, The Republic, and inside it he placed the most powerful philosophical metaphor ever written, the allegory of the cave. Imagine a cave deep underground. At the back is a large fire. Prisoners are chained to the floor, unable to move their heads, able only to stare at the wall in front of them. Behind the prisoners, people hold up flat figures, silhouettes of animals, people, objects, and the fire casts the shadows onto the wall. For the prisoners, those shadows are reality. They name them, tell stories about them, compete to predict which shadow will come next. They honor the ones who are best at reading the shadows. One day, a prisoner's chains come loose. He turns around, he sees the fire, it blinds him. Gradually, he adjusts to the light. Then he climbs up and out of the cave into daylight. This blinds him again. Slowly, painfully, he adjusts. He sees trees, animals, the world as it actually is. Finally, he looks up and sees the sun, the source of all light, all life, all truth. For the first time, he truly understands reality. But then he feels guilt. He thinks of his friends still trapped in the cave, staring at shadows. So he goes back. He stumbles around in the darkness, his eyes no longer adjusted. He tries to tell the prisoners what he has seen. He cannot describe it in language they understand. They think he is insane. When he insists on trying to lead them toward the light, they kill him. That man, Plato tells us, is Socrates. Democracy killed truth. Democracy killed the one person who could have saved it. First, it transforms how history remembers Socrates. Before Plato, Socrates was the annoying fraud from the clouds. After Plato, Socrates becomes the greatest philosopher who ever lived, the martyr for truth. Second, it gives Christians their template for understanding Jesus. Jesus was God who descended into our world to speak the truth. And because we were afraid of the truth, we killed him. Socrates and Jesus become mirror images. Third, it gives Western philosophy and Christianity their basic picture of reality. There is a higher world, eternal, perfect, unchanging, from which our imperfect world derives. The source of that higher world is what Plato calls the form of the good. From it flow reason, beauty, truth, and justice. Everything we see in this world is only a shadow. Plato is, in this very real sense, the intellectual founder of the Christian religion. The Republic is Plato's attempt to answer the question, if democracy is not the right system, what is? His answer, a society built on justice, ruled by philosopher kings. People who have made the journey out of the cave, who have seen the sun, and who can lead others toward the light. It is a beautiful and deeply authoritarian idea, and the tension at its center between the few who can see clearly and the many who are chained in comfortable darkness is still one of the great fault lines of political life. Should the people govern themselves, even if they mostly reason from shadows? Or should the wise govern the people, even if the people never asked for it? Socrates chose to be the gadfly who asked the question. He chose to go back into the cave and point toward the light, and he was killed for it. That story is not about ancient Athens. It is about every society at every moment where the truth is inconvenient and the messenger is easier to silence than